Hey guys, welcome to The Strong Young Man. A man's job is to provide more than he consumes. This means that men are responsible for bearing the burden and responsibility for building and contributing positively towards society. Masculine men in particular make the world a better place. Masculinity has extreme value and should be encouraged in all men. Masculinity will be responsible for the future successes of the world, which will ensure humans continue to survive and thrive into the future. You should embrace and celebrate your masculinity. Be proud of it. It's a wonderful thing to be a man. Men have built everything that you see and everything that you don't see. Men are putting things in places that make life better for women and children everywhere. They are working in difficult places and doing the impossible. As men, we should be proud to be a part of this. We should celebrate masculinity for all that it brings to the table, and we should encourage everyone to give back to one another. Women, on the other hand, self-destruct if they're left to their own devices. An interesting insight that exemplifies just how inadequate women are without the fruits of positive masculinity can be seen from Season 2 of The Island with Bear Grylls. 14 men were dropped in the middle of one island and 14 women in the middle of another. It was up to each group to survive for 6 weeks. Within the first day, the men had identified that they needed to find a safe place to sleep away from the jungle creatures, and by nightfall they had achieved this objective by finding the coast. By the second day, they came up with a plan to start a fire to boil water to drink and cook the food that would sustain them. Splitting up in groups, they assigned the engineer and the builder to light the fire and then sent the rest to hunt for food for the day. Collaborative teamwork enabled them to catch and dispatch a caiman crocodile which sustained them for several weeks on the island. In the final weeks, they were able to develop a strategy for catching their daily feed by using a net that was washed up on the beach. For the women, some of them were crying from the despair before they even left the boat. Once on the island, they wasted precious daylight chatting and getting to know each other, and so they failed to find a safe place to sleep on the first night, sleeping at a temporary camp in the jungle close to the drop point. Lacking the foresight and planning, it took them 5 hours and well into the night to start a fire. By day 2, they decided to split up to find a safe place to set up base. One group to remain at the temporary camp and the other expedition party were to set out to find the coast. This exercise was futile, so the expedition party regrouped at the temporary camp to spend their second night sleeping with the jungle creatures. Day 3 saw a different expedition party set out again to find the coast, which they eventually did. Day 4 was dedicated to the expedition party returning to the women who stayed at the temporary camp. Unfortunately, the expedition party set off from the beach in the wrong direction and became disorientated within a few hours. Going in circles, they had only made it a few hundred metres from where they started. The expedition party spent another 2 days going in circles and ending back up at the beach, never finding their way back to the temporary camp. Back at the temporary camp, over days 3 and 4, the women were struggling, losing their fire and suffering from dehydration. Divisive arguing featured prominently in their discussions, rather than collaborative teamwork. By day 5, one of the women fell deathly ill from not consuming enough water. The producers had to intervene to prevent her from dying. What I found stunning in the early phases of the experiment was the sheer lack of foresight that all the women in the experiment possessed. They refused to look for water until people were showing signs of dehydration and refused to start another fire after it had gone out until they needed it to boil water. They refused to kill the wildlife until they were bordering on starving themselves. Rather than dispatching the wild pigs, they domesticated them, named them, and even fed them whatever food they could find. As their body weight rapidly dropped, they started celebrating the weight loss, even hoping for more. The whole experiment was much more of a struggle for the women, with Bear Grylls having to intervene multiple times in the series just to keep them alive. I understand that humans don't live like this anymore. The actual reason for this is that men, not women, have created things that allow us to live comfortable lives. Urbanisation has resulted in farming, electricity, gasoline, sewage, and mining that make everyone's life easier. These jobs are all performed by men to ensure society continues to function. The appreciation of this labour is so deficient, often from the people who benefit from it the most, women. If you removed men, within a few weeks, farming would stop, the power grids would shut off, the mining and manufacture of gasoline would halt, and the water and sewerage system would cease to function. Women would die within 2 to 3 weeks of this happening. On the other hand, men could live out their lives comfortably without women. It would just be a little lonelier. Men can do every job that women do for themselves to a degree sufficient to ensure group survival. On the other hand, you will not find enough women who are willing to lay brick, crawl through the sewers, work down the mines, or on the oil rigs. These are the masculine jobs. Maybe 1% of women would take up this responsibility, but 1% of the weaker gender is not enough to ensure that 50% of the population can survive. Women who don't believe they need men are so short-sighted, and they should be embarrassed. Some women go so far as to shame men and label them as toxic oppressors for doing these jobs. Yeah, right, like a man gets up at 4 a.m. to clean garbage off the streets to oppress women. Worse is when women dismiss masculinity as toxic and then proceed to claim the benefits that positive masculinity offers. Does any sane human being genuinely believe that men are toxic for waking up at 4 a.m., risking their lives to do the hardest jobs in order to support a family? Does any retard genuinely believe that men do this to oppress women? The masculine energy renders a man willing to do the fundamental jobs of society that keep us all alive. Men are okay with bearing the bulk of the responsibility, but we don't do it to oppress women. We are hardwired to absorb the majority of the responsibility for providing for women and children. It's our duty, and it's done to balance out the burden of responsibility that women take on when they have our children. Are women oppressing men by having children? I don't fucking think so. Smarter members of society understand that men and women are better as complementary opposites rather than adversarial competitors. It's the gender differences, not the androgynous similarities, that make us work best together. Differences between the sexes have evolved over 2.4 million years into a complementary form of support, where one gender's strengths make up for the other gender's weaknesses and vice versa. If a woman genuinely seeks independence from men, then she should move out to the bush to be truly independent. It's a conflicting statement to say that I don't need no man, but then shamelessly live in a house built by men, use electricity from coal that was mined by men, from a grid serviced by men, use the water and sewage system built and maintained by men, eat food harvested or killed and then transported by men, and put oil in their car drilled for by men. True independence is when you forfeit all of these luxuries. Claims of complete independence are total bullshit. No humans have ever survived in complete independence, including men. Somewhere, on some level, even men depend on other men. Ironically, you will never catch a man saying that he doesn't need no man. We have always been cooperative creatures that work together to further the interests of the people we care about and society in general. Women benefit the most from masculine cooperation, and they totally and utterly cannot live without it. Today's finishing thought comes from Ayn Rand in her magnum opus, Atlas Shrugged. If you saw Atlas, the giant who holds the world on his shoulders, if you saw that he stood, blood running down his chest, his knees buckling, his arms trembling, but still trying to hold the world aloft with the last of his strength, and the greater his effort, the heavier the world bore down upon his shoulders, what would you tell him? To shrug? There is only one kind of men who have never been on strike in human history. Every other kind and class have stopped when they so wished and presented demands to the world claiming to be indispensable, except the men who have carried the world on their shoulders, have kept it alive, have endured torture as sole payment, but have never walked out on the human race. Let the world discover what they do and what happens when they refuse to function. Atlas can't shrug. The entire human existence depends on men standing up and taking responsibility for their burden of performance, and to bear this burden with silent dignity. Thanks for watching today's episode. In episode 136, I'll go over the importance of planning things from start to finish. Subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified when it drops. Catch you then.